If you're someone with ADHD like me, then you're probably struggling with a mess, especially since you're here watching this video. The bulk of the mess, or a big contributor to that mess, is probably your laundry. Like, laundry is just the bane of my life. I've just never been able to keep on top of it. I've always got piles everywhere. And piles of clean laundry, piles of dirty laundry. Anyway, you know how it goes. So today I've got some clean laundry to fold. But yeah, I've got this basket that, frankly, I'm not even gonna lie, this basket actually has been full for 3 weeks. The wardrobes are kind of feeling a bit starting to feel a bit empty now of the clothes that we usually go for, because they're mostly in this basket. So I feel like I'm just going to make this my priority today. So yeah, as I was thinking about today's video, there's something that I've been trying to come to terms with since my diagnosis, and I think this really affects people who've been diagnosed with ADHD quite late in life. So I was diagnosed last year in my mid-30s, right slap bang in my mid, so 34. And when I did get that diagnosis, I think one of the first set of things that I really thought of is, oh my god, like, so many years of my life have been wasted. I always use this term, like, a wasted. I especially talk about that initial 10 to 12 to 13 years after school. So I went through a lot of enrolling onto courses, dropping out, starting jobs, and then not staying in there for too long, staying in there for like 2-3 months, 6 months, 1 year, then moving on to the next thing. I went to university 3 times. I actually have 5 years worth of debt, because the first 2 times I went to university, obviously I was charged the full year's fee the first time because I dropped out halfway through the year. And then I went the second time, paid the fees through student loans, but I dropped out again. And it was on a third attempt, which was 3 years, that I actually managed to, go through and complete. So that's one thing, like, financially, and not just financially in terms of university fees, but financially in so many other ways. Like, there's so many decisions that I've made that have pulled me back. And in hindsight, I realized that was a lot of it has got to do with making impulsive decisions. So last year I did something really silly. I made an impulsive decision and I spent 12 grand. That 12 grand just disappeared into the air. And there's so many times in my life where I've acted like that. And I just think, imagine if I had known in childhood, or if I had been diagnosed in childhood, and I would have been educated about my symptoms and my behaviors, and how to identify when I'm behaving in a way that displays aspects of my ADHD, of my neurodivergent brain, then maybe I would have learned to cope with it better. Maybe I would have been a different person. It really, really hurts that you struggled for so long, and you had this sense of just being alone, and you knew that you were different. You knew that there was something not right, but because you're trying so hard to hide it, you're trying so hard with the masking to kind of come across as a normal person. That's why you spend so long being undiagnosed. And so by the time you do get diagnosed, you've ended up wasting almost 2 decades, almost 2 decades. I'm 2 decades now out of compulsory school education. So, the reason why I talk about that time, that point of, when you come out of compulsory school education, is because that's the age when you are expected to make your own choices. You have to make a choice of what profession you're going to. You have to make a choice of what subjects you want to study, so that to drive forward the career that you want to build. And I really struggled with that because I was good at a lot of subjects at school, and so it was so hard to choose because it's too much choice. With ADHD, when you have too much choice, it's really difficult to make a decision. Yeah, so you come from a place where you were always top of the class without even trying, and then you see your peers then going on to become doctors, solicitors, lawyers, engineers, university professors, you see them going to start successful businesses, and you just wonder to yourself, what the hell is wrong with me? I have all these things about me. I have so many talents. I'm so creative. I am really good at art. I excelled academically. I get on with everyone. I'm polite. I grasp things quickly. Why is my life this spiral of failures? Why is it this happening to me? That grief is really, really real. The grief is so real. And now that I think about it, my mum is, in my opinion, I think she has ADHD, but she's undiagnosed. And for a lot of her life she went through a lot of abuse. I think she also feels that sense of grief as well, and she's retired now, but I see that in her. I see her grieving as well, because she can't stop this thought of what could I have become. And so you always see her trying to start this business, that business, then it fails, that business, then it fails, and then she would go into things willy-nilly without thinking. It's almost like gambling, but it's like she's looking for that thing that's going to get her back to where she would have been had she not experienced those things. And I feel like that's what I've been trying to do as well for the past few years. When I decided to go back to university for the third time, I was 29. That was the moment where I took it really seriously, and my last year of university I got a job. I stayed in it for 1 year. I switched, I moved jobs, got an increase in salary. I stayed there for 1 year, and then I was looking for the next thing to step me up, because in my mind I'm chasing the person that I probably would have been had I not wasted those 20 years of my life. That's just how I see it. In one of these positions that I was leaving, when I had my final meeting with them and everyone was saying their goodbyes to me, and vice versa, I actually mentioned this fact. And at the time I wasn't diagnosed. I mentioned the fact that I'm trying to catch up with where I would be in my career had I followed the traditional path straight out of school and graduated from university at the typical age of 21 or 22. I think not having started building a stable career from the age of 21, 22, which is a typical age, is something that has really, really affected me. You know what, it's even actually so ironic, because even though I feel like having ADHD and the fact that it was undiagnosed for so long, that's what has held me back or not allowed me to progress for all those years. But at the same time, there are things about my ADHD traits and behaviors that have allowed me to actually excel my career in a very short space of time within the past 4 or 5 years. There's a lot of irony in that. The same thing that's made you feel like a failure is the same thing that's contributed to your successes, and a huge contributor to my success. Recently, I had a close family member. It was one of the first few people actually that I had told about my diagnosis, and a couple of weeks later we were talking about something, and they made a comment about blaming everything on ADHD. That really hurt. It really hurt, because I don't think that people understand what it means to recognize yourself, and when you know what you're dealing with, that's when you know what tools to use. I remember in the classroom this concept being brought to our attentions a lot when I was younger, and that was the different types of learners. There's visual learners, there's auditory learners, there's kinesthetic learners, and it's the same sort of thing there. You're recognizing that people learn in different ways. But when it comes to ADHD, it's undiagnosed, so you can't make sense of which options are the best for you, because you don't have the options. You're not considering any options. And so you can't tell someone that, oh, you're just blaming it all on ADHD. I'm not blaming it on ADHD. I'm recognizing the fact that if I had known when I was so much younger that this is what I was dealing with, then I would have known which tools to use to increase my chances of success with everything, with career, with relationships. I've had 2 long-term failed relationships because of various reasons, but I'm sure my ADHD had a part to play in it. Not having long-term bonded, secured friendships, you know. I don't really have friends. Like, I find it uncomfortable to say that a certain person is my friend when I only speak to them once a year, or when I only speak to them once in 2 or 3 years, you know. It's hard to say that that person's my friend. Is that a friend? I don't know. Yeah, maybe my relationship with my mother, my family would be different, because if I knew that this was ADHD in the works, you don't know. You see so many things now in hindsight that you know now that the reason why those things are the way they are, the reason why those events in your life played out the way they did, or the reason why those relationships are the way they are, is because of your traits, of your ADHD or neurodivergent traits and behaviors. So it's hard not to talk about ADHD when you've been diagnosed so late in life. Grieving that person is a big part of being diagnosed with ADHD at a later stage in your life. I'm taking the time out to understand that feeling and to actually get over those emotions as I'm grieving that person, whoever that person would have been. I think that's why getting a diagnosis is so important in so many ways. But one of the ways is letting go of this need to feel like you have to prove yourself to the world or to people, or even prove yourself to yourself that you can do certain things despite all the failures. Like, it's kind of like you have a chip on your shoulder. But when I got diagnosed with ADHD, it kind of acts as a soother, and you realize that, you know what, I don't need to go through that anymore. If I'm going to do something, it's because I really want to do it. I really enjoy doing it, and it's not because I want to prove anything to anyone. I know that I'm a success. Like, look at me. I've lasted so long without any help, without the support that I probably should have had, without any formal coping techniques, without even knowing what was going on inside this brain of mine for so long. That in itself is a success. And I'm just going to leave you with this little clip, I think, to end this with. There's a conversation between Laura Key of ADHD AHA, that podcast, and Renee Brooks, and what Renee Brooks said about this grieving process, and I think it was really comforting.
And for people who are in the thick of that grieving process right now, who are getting diagnosed later in life, what advice do you have for them, or maybe some hopeful words?
The person who you could have become is not someone who you can gain access to, but the person you can become now is. And that's far more important than the person who could have been. That grief is heavy, and that trauma is real, and it really does feel like a slap in the face. Either I didn't have to go through that at all, or I didn't have to go through it in that way alone with no support. That is a painful realization. I think it's really important to honor those feelings of grief, but I also think it's just as important not to get lured by the trap of thinking that the person you could have been is the person you should be focusing on. Because you have a life now.